Most people planning to retire at 60 in the UK have a spreadsheet. Maybe two. They've done the sums, they know their SIPP balance, and they've heard the rule, withdraw 5% a year, your money lasts. Sorted. Except it doesn't. I spent a long time going through the actual numbers, not the American numbers that circulate on YouTube, not the textbook figures, the real UK ones. Inflation sitting around 2.5%. Platform fees plus fund charges adding another 1.2% to 1.5%. And a stock market that frankly doesn't care about your retirement date. When you subtract all of that from a realistic 6% market return, your real growth is sitting at roughly 2%. If you're drawing 5%, you're spending 3% of your own pot every single year, even when the market is doing well. That's not a withdrawal rate, that's a slow bleed. The number that actually holds up, once you run the UK-specific maths, is 3.5%. Not 5, not 4, 3.5. And that gap between the number people are planning with and the number that actually works is where I want to start today. Because this video isn't really about withdrawal rates. It's about the 7-year stretch between age 60 and 67, the years before state pension kicks in, and why that gap is quietly the most dangerous and potentially the most valuable period of your entire retirement. It contains tax traps most people only discover after they've already walked into them. I've been looking at this closely for a long time, and today I want to show you exactly what I found. If this kind of thing is useful to you, it would mean a lot if you'd subscribe. I make these videos for people who are actually trying to plan this properly. Let's start with Colin. Colin turned 60 in January. He's worked hard his whole career, saved consistently, and his SIPP is sitting at £450,000. He's done the planning. He's ready. His plan is simple. Draw 5% a year, £22,500, live comfortably, and wait for state pension to kick in at 67. 7 years. Bridgeable, manageable. On paper, it looks fine. But here's where the maths quietly falls apart. Colin is assuming his pot grows at around 6% a year. That's not an unreasonable estimate for a balanced portfolio. But that 6% is the headline number before everything else takes a bite. UK inflation has been running at around 2.5%. That erodes the real value of his pot. Then there are platform fees, the charge his SIPP provider takes, plus the OCF, the ongoing charge from the funds themselves. In the UK, those typically add up to somewhere between 1.2% and 1.5% a year. So, 6% return minus 2.5% inflation minus 1.5% in fees. Real growth, 2%. Colin is withdrawing 5%. His pot is only growing at 2%. That means he's consuming 3% of his actual capital every single year. Even in good years, even when markets are rising, that is the hidden maths. And most retirement calculators don't show it to you that clearly. Now, add something called sequence of returns risk. This is the one that genuinely worries me for people retiring right now. If UK markets dip in year 1 or 2 of Colin's retirement, not crash, just dip, and he's still drawing £22,500, he's selling units at the worst possible time. Those units are gone. They can't recover. The long-term average return becomes meaningless because the damage is done early and it's permanent. I used to think 4% to 5% was a defensible range. I genuinely did. It was only when I sat down with clients and started pulling apart every platform statement, every fund charge, every real inflation figure that I realized my earlier assumptions were too generous. The UK context simply doesn't support it. The actual ceiling, the rate at which Colin's pot has a reasonable chance of surviving to age 90, is 3.5%. At £450,000, that's £15,750 a year, not £22,500. That's a meaningful difference, about £560 a month. For 7 years, before state pension adds roughly £12,000 on top at 67. So Colin now faces a real question. Does he accept a tighter budget through the bridge, or does he find a way to supplement his income? And this is where a lot of people, sensible, well-organized people, make a move that feels completely logical. They think, right, I'll draw a bit less from the pension. I'll pick up some part-time work. A couple of days a week. Keep myself busy, protect the pot, top up the income. Problem solved. Except the moment Colin does that. The moment he takes a penny of taxable income from his pension while also contributing to one, he opens a door he can't close again. And what comes through that door is something most people have never heard of until it's too late. That's what we need to talk about next. So Colin picks up some consultancy work. 2 days a week, a former client, decent rate. It feels like the right call. Structured days, a bit of extra income, and the pension pot gets a chance to breathe. His employer, a small firm, automatically enrolls him and starts making contributions into a new pension. Colin tops it up himself. Nothing unusual. This is what responsible people do. What Colin doesn't know is that 12 months earlier, when he took his first flexible withdrawal from his SIPP, he triggered something called the Money Purchase Annual Allowance, the MPAA. And that changes everything. Before that first withdrawal, Colin had an annual allowance of £60,000. That's the total amount that can go into his pension each year, from him, from employers, from anywhere, and still receive tax relief. £60,000 is a generous ceiling. Most people never come close to it. The moment he accessed his pension flexibly, that ceiling collapsed to £10,000, not gradually, immediately. From £60,000 to £10,000, an 83% reduction in his tax-protected allowance. Now, between his own contributions and what the firm is paying in, Colin goes over £10,000 for the year. Every pound above that limit gets taxed as income. No relief on the way in. Just a bill from HMRC at the end of the tax year, calculated at his marginal rate. He wasn't trying to game the system. He was trying to be sensible. The tax charge arrived anyway. Last month I spoke with someone, a woman in her early 60s, who'd been doing a few shifts at a B&Q a couple of times a week. She enjoyed it. It got her out of the house, gave her routine, a bit of social contact. She'd taken a small flexible withdrawal from her pension the previous year, didn't think much of it at the time. When the letter came from HMRC, she rang me in tears. The charge wasn't enormous in absolute terms, but it felt like a punishment for doing everything right. Her HR department hadn't flagged it. Her payroll hadn't flagged it. Nobody had told her that the two things, the pension withdrawal and the new employment, were connected in the eyes of the tax system. That's the part that stays with me. It's not that the rule is secret. It's in the HMRC Pension Tax Manual. It's just that the people who need to know it most are the ones least likely to come across it. The structural logic, if you want to understand it, the MPAA exists to stop people recycling money. Draw from your pension, get the tax relief on the way out, then immediately pour it back in and get relief again on the way in. HMRC closed that loop deliberately. The problem is, the rule doesn't distinguish between recycling and simply trying to live. So the trade-off here is a painful one. You think you're protecting your retirement pot by keeping active and earning. You may actually be generating a tax liability that quietly cancels out part of what you earned. The check, if you're in this situation or approaching it, is straightforward. Before you take any flexible income from a pension, understand what it does to your allowance. And if you're planning to work in any capacity that involves pension contributions, yours or an employer's, model it out first. If you haven't taken any flexible withdrawals yet, you still have options. That window matters more than most people realize. But here's the thing. Once you understand the trap, the 7 years between 60 and 67 start to look very different. Because those same years, the ones that feel like a financial obstacle, are actually the most generous tax window most UK savers will ever have access to, and nearly everyone lets it close without using it. Here is something most people in their early 60s don't fully appreciate. If you've stopped working, you have a personal allowance of £12,570 sitting there every single tax year. That's the amount you can receive as income before paying a penny of tax. And if you're living off ISA withdrawals or savings, that allowance is going completely to waste. This is where the 7-year bridge stops being a problem and starts being an opportunity. Let's say you're not working, no employment income. You take £12,570 out of your SIPP this year from the taxable portion. Your personal allowance absorbs every pound of it. Tax bill, zero. Do that for 7 years, from 60 to 67, and you've pulled £87,990 out of your pension completely free of tax. Legally, quietly, without doing anything unusual at all. That money doesn't have to sit in a current account. You can move it straight into an ISA, up to £20,000 per year in the current tax year, where it grows free of tax and can be withdrawn without any further tax implications ever. You're essentially shifting money from a tax-deferred environment into a tax-free one during the only years in your life when the cost of doing so is nothing. Most people do the opposite. They leave the pension untouched. It keeps growing, which feels responsible, and they draw down their ISA first because it feels simpler. By the time they reach 67 and state pension starts, their ISA is depleted. Their pension is large, and every pound they take out now gets stacked on top of their state pension income and taxed accordingly. The sequencing matters enormously, and it runs completely counter to what most people's instincts tell them. Now, there's another layer to this. From the 5th of April, 2027, which is not far away, pension pots will fall within the scope of inheritance tax for the first time. Unused pension funds will be counted as part of your estate when you die. At the current 40% IHT rate, a large pension pot left untouched could mean a substantial and avoidable bill for whoever inherits it. This changes the calculation again. The pension is no longer a neutral store of wealth to be left alone. It becomes, in many cases, the most tax-inefficient asset to pass on, and the most tax-efficient to draw down carefully while you're alive. There's also the lump sum allowance to be aware of. Since the lifetime allowance was abolished in 2024, the LSA, currently £268,275, caps the total amount of tax-free cash you can take from pensions across your lifetime. If you're planning to take larger lump sums, this ceiling matters. Taking smaller, phased withdrawals, sometimes called UFPLS, uncrystallized fund pension lump sums, allows you to spread your tax-free entitlement across multiple years rather than using it all at once. It's a more flexible approach, and for most people retiring in their early 60s, it tends to be the more efficient one. None of this is complicated in principle. What makes it feel complicated is that it runs against the grain of how most people have been taught to think about their pension, as something you protect, something you leave alone, something you draw on only when you have to. The shift is this: between 60 and 67, with no employment income and a personal allowance available every year, your pension is not something to protect. It's something to harvest, carefully, deliberately, at the right rate. 7 years, £87,990 in tax-free withdrawals, a growing ISA, and a pension that enters the state pension years leaner, cleaner, and far better positioned for what comes after 2027. Those numbers are entirely within your control. The maths is done, the window is open. What stops most people isn't HMRC, it's something quieter than that. I want to read you something. It's a comment left under one of my earlier videos, and I've had permission to share it. I'm 61. House is paid off, £400,000 in my SIPP. No debt. I go into work every single day, hoping they'll make me redundant so I can leave with a payoff and not feel guilty about stopping. I've read that comment probably a dozen times. Because it's not unusual. It's one of the most common things I hear from people in this exact position. The spreadsheet says, go. Every rational signal says go. And yet, there's a name for this in behavioral finance: one more year syndrome. The idea that if you just work one more year, the number will feel safe enough, certain enough, real enough to actually stop. Except one more year becomes 2. Then 3. And the goalposts move every time, because the feeling you're chasing isn't a number. It's permission. The shift from accumulation to decumulation, from building a pot to drawing it down, is genuinely one of the most psychologically difficult transitions in adult financial life, and it doesn't get talked about honestly enough. For 30 or 40 years, a monthly salary has been the floor beneath you. It arrives without you having to decide anything. It doesn't require courage, it just comes. The moment you retire, that floor disappears. And what replaces it is a pot of money that you now have to actively manage, actively draw from, actively trust. Every withdrawal feels like subtraction, even when the maths says it's fine. I've watched people with more than enough sit on their hands for years, not because they were reckless, because the transition itself is hard, and nobody really prepares you for that part. And here is the trade-off that rarely gets said plainly. The years between 60 and 70 are, for most people, the healthiest and most capable years of their retirement. These are the years you can travel without it being an ordeal. The years you can take on a garden project, help with grandchildren, do the things you've been saying you'll do when you have time. Every additional year in work is a year of that traded away, often for money you will statistically never spend. The average UK retiree's spending drops meaningfully after 75. Not because they've become more frugal, because their world gets smaller. The window for the kind of retirement most people are actually imagining is shorter than the spreadsheet implies. I can show you the ISA sequencing. I can walk you through the Personal Allowance optimization, the MPAA rules, the LSA ceiling. I can build you a model that accounts for inflation, platform fees, sequence of returns risk, and the IHT changes coming in April 2027. I'm reasonably good at that part. What I can't give you is the decision itself. The moment where you look at the numbers, accept that they're good enough, and choose to stop. That's not a financial calculation. It's something else entirely, and it's yours to make. What I will say is this: the people I've seen make that transition well are not the ones who waited until the number felt perfect. They're the ones who decided that time had a value the spreadsheet couldn't capture, and acted on that. The maths, as we've covered today, is solvable. The 3.5% ceiling, the tax window, the MPAA, these are navigable. They require attention and a bit of planning, but they're not obstacles. They're the rules of a game that, once you understand it, you can play well. The only question left is whether you're ready to start. So let's bring this together. If you're approaching 60 or you're already there are 3 things worth doing before anything else. First, recalculate your withdrawal rate using 3.5% as your ceiling, not 5%. Run the real UK numbers, after inflation, after platform fees, after fund charges. If the result feels tight, that's useful information. It means you need a plan for the bridge, not a more optimistic assumption. Second, if you're considering any part-time work or consultancy during retirement, find out whether you've already taken any flexible income from your pension. If you have, the MPAA applies. Any pension contributions, yours or an employer's, above £10,000 in a tax year will cost you. Know this before you sign a contract, not after. Third, start using your personal allowance. Every year between now and 67 that you leave £12,570 of pension income untouched is a year of tax-free withdrawal you can't get back. Move it into an ISA. Let it sit somewhere the taxman can't follow. And do it before April 2027, when pension pots become subject to inheritance tax for the first time. That deadline is real, and it's closer than it feels. Retiring at 60 is not a leap of faith. It's a set of decisions about sequencing, about timing, about understanding which rules apply to you and in what order. The people who do it well are not the ones with the largest pots. They're the ones who understood the structure early enough to work with it. The 7 years between 60 and 67 are not a gap to survive. They're the most tax-efficient window most people in the UK will ever have. And most people let it close without realizing it was open. Thank you for watching. Time is the one asset that doesn't respond to inflation, but it does run out. Subscribe to stay ahead of the decisions that actually matter. I'll see you in the next one.